And I realized that a big part of what I had been waiting for, a big part of what I had been afraid of, is that the people closest to me and my family would think it was irresponsible of me to leave my job where I had a stable paycheck and I had health insurance and I had retirement benefits to try something that was a risk. Every time you start a business, it's a risk. You could make millions, but you could also lose a lot.
Welcome to Work It, Live It, Own It, a show that explores how to upgrade your lifestyle through life lessons, real estate, and entrepreneurship. Here's your hostess, Sekola Lair. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode. How many of you out there have a 9 to 5 and still working your business on the side? Now, sometimes our jobs or our jobs are the type that is so frustrating and aggravating that we just woke up one day and realized, hey, I need to start my own business and run my own schedule and live the life that I've always wanted to live. But what if you had a cushy 9 to 5 job where you helped others set and achieve their goals? But do you have a bigger calling? Or did you have a wake up call? So today's guest, Megan Gillman, is a passionate coach dedicated to helping others connect with their inner voice and pursue their true passions. And Megan also had a cushy 9 to 5 job. She's helped everyone set and achieve their goals. But what Megan didn't realize was that she was neglecting her own dreams until she had two significant wake up calls. And those pivotal, I cannot talk today, pivotal. There we go. Pivotal. See, we make mistakes on podcasts too. And these pivotal moments propelled her to leave the safety of her job and embark on her entrepreneurial journey that she was truly meant for. So, welcome to the WLO community, Megan. Thank you for coming on and sharing your inspiring story with us today.
Thank you so much for having me, and thanks for that beautiful introduction.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for being our gracious guest. So, Megan, I don't want to dive in, but I am a little bit curious about how, if you can, share with us a little bit more specifically about the wake up calls that prompted you to leave your 9 to 5 job and pursue your passion as an entrepreneur.
Yes. Well, just like you said, the hardest thing for me to wrap my head around had been that I loved my job and I loved my work. So I was helping to run the honors program at a major Southern university, like Division 1 athletics, big brick buildings. And the students I was working with were fantastic. It was exactly the kind of people I wanted to be working with. They had big dreams, big ambitions, and they were right at the start of that journey. So it was really fun for me. And that's actually how I received my training as a life coach was through the university. I got life coach training so that I could better support these students instead of just telling them, yeah, these are the classes you have to take next semester. I could really coach them through how do you make your own choices. If they wanted to change their major, I could help them really deep dive into a career coaching session. Um, if they were nervous about something or even dealing with relationships with their parents and boundaries, I could help coach them through that. And I loved it so much. And after I did my coach training, whenever anyone asked me, like, what do you see yourself doing in 5 years? I would always say, I want to start my own life coaching practice. I want to be doing this all the time. And I want to be doing it with people who are actively looking for life coaching. Wonderful thing about college students is there's so many different ideas and ambitions, and they all have so much drive, right? But the downside is that most of the time they're not coming to see me voluntarily. We have to like require them to come in and meet with me, and they're not always seeking out that advice. So I
Mhm.
wanted to work with people who were maybe not all 18 to 20. I wanted to work with a wider array of humans and I wanted to work with a wider range of issues. So I knew that this was what I wanted to do. And anytime anyone asked me, I was like, I want to start my own life coaching practice. I'm ready. I've got the skills. I'm doing it already. But I just wasn't taking action on it. It seemed like it wasn't the right time. It seemed like I already have like the job I have now, it's public service, so my student loans will get forgiven if I stay in it long enough. It's got great health insurance, so if I have kids, I'm set for that. And it pays me enough. It's got a lot of prestige. I have a really fancy office and a really big desk and a window. Like you said, it was pretty cushy. And the first really stressful wake up call that I got was as I was working in this job. I had trained as a yoga instructor and I was teaching yoga classes maybe 2 or 3 times a week, just on the side as, a fun hobby. And I remember one evening I'm home walking my dogs and I start getting flooded with text messages with people asking if I'm okay. And I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. I'm out walking my dogs. What are you talking about? And it turns out that the yoga studio I teach at had an active shooter situation.
Mm.
So someone who had never been to the studio before came in, signed in as if he was taking a class, and then in the first 5 minutes took out a gun and started shooting people in the room. And so I live in a city, but it's not a huge city. So word traveled really quickly, even while the situation was actively happening. And I'm getting all of these text messages and calls from people wondering if I'm okay because they know I teach there. I could have been in that room. I often took classes there on Friday nights, right? So there's no good reason that I wasn't there other than chance and luck. And just that wasn't my plan for the day. And that was my first huge wake up call. In the moment, I didn't process it. But in the weeks after, as I was trying to get back into my normal and grieving the loss of some of our students at the yoga studio and some of the students who had been in my classes and just trying to come to terms with what had happened, it really made me reevaluate like, what am I waiting for? Because tomorrow is not guaranteed. And that was my first really big wake up call. It was very hard for me to process. I got free counseling right away from my university. They offered free counseling to anyone who had been impacted by that incident. And I took advantage of that and started trying to work through it. My students were so supportive. They were bringing in like flowers and just trying to take really good emotional care of me. And so I felt really supported, but I also felt like, you know, there, but for the grace of God, like I could have been in that same situation and my whole life could have been completely changed or my life could have been over. And it took me a while to feel comfortable sharing this story just because it wasn't my story. I wasn't there. It was it was an almost. And that was my first big wake up call. And that happened in November. And then a few months later, as I'm kind of getting back into normal, I worked with college students. So this isn't something I had been expecting, but I was in a staff meeting and our director started the staff meeting by saying, just something I need to let you all know about. Um, the student, she shared the name, passed away last night unexpectedly. Um, we're not sure what had happened. She passed in her sleep, but she won't be coming back. And I just wanted to share it with anyone, like with our team, because she was one of the students in our program. And she was a student that I had worked pretty closely with. She had been one of the student employees that I trained. I had worked with her throughout a whole semester, and she came to me as her main advisor. And I just felt so devastated by the loss of this young woman who I believe it had turned out to be a brain aneurysm that she didn't know she had. She wasn't aware of any medical conditions. And then one day she just didn't wake up. And I remember thinking how frustrated I was that she had spent all of her time doing exactly what she was supposed to put the building blocks in place for her life. She was doing the responsible things. She was in college, she was getting her degree, she was going to go to graduate school, she was going to get a job, and then she was going to start her life. And instead, she never got the part she was planning for, right? You go to college, if you enroll in any sort of program of learning, you're doing it with the expectation that once I finish this, I can start something else, right? I can start my dream. I can start my next passion project. And I was just really devastated by the idea that she had done all the prep work to get herself ready to do it the right way and that she would never see the payoff of that. And I walked out of my office that day. So I stayed for the rest of the staff meeting and then I talked to my supervisor and I excused myself for the rest of the morning. I was like, I need to go process some of this. And was sitting there eating like a croissant and a cup of coffee, giving myself my comfort food and just thinking, what am I waiting for? When is it going to be the right time to start actually chasing my dreams instead of just preparing to one day be ready to start chasing my dreams? Because I had been waiting for like the right moment, like when everything's in a row, when all your ducks are lined up, and when you have enough in your savings to feel comfortable leaving your job, when you feel like you have the right certifications and the right training, and you know how to start a business, and you know how to manage yourself. I was waiting for myself to feel ready. And these two wake up calls made me realize I might never feel ready to start living my dreams. I might never feel ready to start my own business. But if I don't start it now, I might never start it. And I think that was like, I don't want other women to have to get those kinds of wake up calls before they start living their dreams.
You, Megan, for sharing those wake up calls. They were, first of all, my heart, my condolences goes out to the families and the friends and the associates of those in that yoga studio. I don't know how long ago that happened. Was that recent, like last November, or was it? It's been
No,
a
it
while, but
was about 5 years ago now.
5 years ago, and it's still grief is one of those levels of healing, but it takes different shapes and thing how it comes through for other people. So I can still hear it in your voice, even though you weren't there. Those are people that you saw every week, staying in contact with on a regular basis, and losing a student. And it's also traumatizing. So thank you for being vulnerable enough and brave enough to get through that part of the conversation. I wasn't expecting that. This wasn't pre-planned. I had no idea. And I know that feeling of losing a student, and it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking to lose someone you care about and people you love. And so I'm glad you're still here with us, but again, condolences goes out to the families and friends of those from the yoga studio and for the student that you worked with and those from the university. So I'll first and foremost want to say that in navigating from that, from those two wake up calls that you've had, know there had to be some type of drive in you to start this journey. Can you share with us how you navigated the transition from what we just talked about, from instability and from a stable job that you did have, to starting your own business, both practically and emotionally? How were you able to navigate that transition?
Yes, it was. I feel really privileged to have a very supportive spouse. My husband also has a stable job. And like I said, so after these wake up calls, I was in a place of instability. I was really questioning a lot of things. And one of the things I am so grateful for that when I asked my husband if he would come to counseling with me for a few sessions, he said yes. And it started because I was just having a really hard time processing my emotions. And I didn't feel safe necessarily sharing all that I was feeling with him. Right. And I just wanted someone to help, have us have those conversations in a really safe and supported way. And while we were in those sessions, I had been complaining about how, I don't feel like I can stay at my job anymore. I feel like it's time to start something new. I feel really stuck. I feel like I need to be starting my next chapter and I don't know how to do that. And he said, well, you should just quit your job and you should start your business. And I realized that a big part of what I had been waiting for, a big part of what I had been afraid of, is that the people closest to me and my family would think it was irresponsible of me to leave my job where I had a stable paycheck and I had health insurance and I had retirement benefits to try something that was a risk. Every time you start a business, it's a risk. You could make millions, but you could also lose a lot. You could make nothing, right? It's taking a big chance. And I am the oldest daughter in my family. All of my decisions so far had been fairly responsible. And I just wasn't sure how my family and my husband would react to me making a decision that I thought was irresponsible. So him giving me that permission in our counseling session was the door opening for me. That was him giving me his space and his assurance that I'll be here. You're not in it by yourself. And I don't have any judgment for you for wanting to try out this path. Like, I'm here with you and we'll figure it out together. For me, that was the biggest permission slip I could have gotten.
I love how you said permission slip because it's like I talk about external validation all the time, and I still have those moments where you're battling the external validation, seeking that approval from other people. And like you said, you had the oldest child syndrome, the responsible one, the one who's
Mhm.
supposed to lead by example. And if I start showing or exhibiting irresponsible behavior, then what must people think of me? So once you got that permission slip from your husband, and kudos to your husband for being supportive on your journey and even going to therapy with you, because one of the biggest struggles I think sometimes most of us have is we have all these thoughts going on in our brains, in our heads, and we don't know how to effectively communicate it verbally out to our loved ones. And it ends up manifesting itself out in another way, whether it's irritability, frustration, they don't understand you. And then you're irritated at yourself because it's like, I wish I could communicate this, but how do I get the words out? So kudos for going to therapy, first of all, and having a great therapist to help navigate that process. So, besides getting that permission slip from your husband, though, what were some strategies and mindsets that you had to do in overcoming some doubts and fears during this situation that were most helpful?
The biggest strategy I chose to use, and I think this is a helpful one for anyone who's starting a service based business, if you're doing it from your home, I pursued part time work because I know me, I know how I manage my schedule. And if my schedule is just open forever, I'm not doing anything.
Mm,
I'm not doing it. Right. I need some sort of constraint on my time to make sure that I have motivation to manage the rest of my time.
mhm,
And so I knew I was leaving a full time job. I knew I didn't want another full time job because I wanted most of my time and energy to go to my business. So I took what a lot of people might see as a step down or back. And I went from being an assistant director at a major university to being a trainee at a call center. And I loved it because I was like, well, all I have to do is come sit at this computer. I put on my headphones, I push the button, I answer the phone, I talk to the person, I follow the directions, and when they're done, we hang up the phone. And then when
mhm,
I clock out, I'm home. I never have to think about this ever. And for me, it was a call center, but I was fully ready. I was like, if it's bagging groceries at Whole Foods, that's fine. If it's, you know, if it's driving Uber, that's fine, but I needed to set up something for me that gave me set hours I had available each week, a reason to come to my planner and to block out my time and to set my to do list each week and to keep going. And I also joined a community of other people who were starting, I think they called it like a community of light workers. It was just a very broad term for like people who are starting things where you want to help other people. And it might be writing books, it might be a podcast, it might be coaching or therapy. Uh, and I joined a community of people who wanted to start businesses like that so that I had, at least on the internet, because I live in North Florida, there's not like a lot of life coaches around me
Mhm.
physically. It's not so much caught on here yet. And I wanted to have some people I could talk to who are going through the same situation, especially since it's just most days it's me in my house by myself with my laptop. Right? It
Mhm.
can feel really isolating. So had a reason for me to leave the house, a reason for me to go somewhere at a certain time, and a little bit of extra money coming in, which was nice for me to pay some of the startup fees for my business, to pay to start the business, to pay to list my website, to pay for my like Zoom and my Canva subscriptions, right? That I use
Mhm.
to work with clients instead of having to ask my husband for that money to start my business. I was able to pull in a little bit. And I didn't stay at that job for long. And I've had other part time jobs since then. I have a part time job now. But for me, it's really helpful to have some set time that I have to be somewhere else so that I know when I'm not there, this is my time to work on my
Mhm.
business. And now I have a 3-year old. So I have a whole nother time constraint that helps keep me in line. But
Mhm.
I would really recommend, if you have the time for it and you're starting a service-based business and you're going to be your own boss, it can be really helpful to give yourself that little extra buffer of cash inflow and of structure to your time that a part-time job can give you.
I love the fact that one, you took a big leap of faith, right? You took a big, huge leap of faith saying, I'm going to leave this nice job that I had at a university, prestigious university, no doubt. And you took that leap of faith to start a journey on your own, even in an area where you said life coaching hasn't quite caught on yet. But you did something practical as well. You took on a part time job and you were realistic about that. So that's another lesson. Didn't matter whether it meant bagging groceries, and there's nothing wrong with making an honest living, bagging groceries, driving a car, being someone's taxi, or dropping off their groceries, whatever it could have been. You took the responsibility, but you also knew yourself. There was self awareness there saying, hey, if my day is wide open, nothing will get done. And I have found that out about myself as well. If it's like, okay, I know if I got appointments or schedules, okay, I know I need to be here. I need to show up. But then it's like, oh, my morning, I can just do whatever. And then nothing gets done. So good for you for realizing self awareness, practicality, and ingenuity of knowing, hey, you still need something to set aside, to lay by, to pay some of these expenses for a business because running a business is costly, is expensive
Mhm.
because the state and the federal government, they're going to want their money too. So, besides those things, and those are really huge things, was there another big challenge? Were there any other big challenges that you had to face early on in the early stages of building your business? And if so, how did you overcome them?
Yeah. I would say there were two big challenges I had to overcome. One, I started my business officially at the end of 2019. And like, y'all know what
Mm,
happened
yes.
at the end
Mhm.
of 2019. So I went right from excitement, starting a business, signing my first couple clients, meeting with people in person to all of a sudden, like, how do you sell someone life coaching when the world is falling apart around you? I know people who figured out answers to that questions. I did not figure out an answer to that question. I like retreated. I hid a little bit and I stopped working on growing my business. I showed up just enough that people knew I was still a life coach. I
Mhm.
wasn't able to market. I wasn't really able to outreach. I actually got pregnant that same time. So I was also like, well, what do I want to do? I was supposed to host my first women's retreat in July 2020. That got canceled. So it was just this big, like, everything was getting canceled. Everything was getting pushed off or pushed back. And we don't really know what's going to happen. And then when we came out of the pandemic, I was a new mom. So I didn't really know how was I going to run my business while I was a mom. So everything slowed down and I kept my clients who had already signed with me, but I didn't really bring in anyone new and I didn't grow my business over the course of the pandemic. And then when I came out, I think that's a challenge that was part of the beauty of that challenge was that everyone else was facing that challenge too. Right? Like no one knew what we were supposed to be doing and everyone was having setbacks at the same time and for some of the same reasons. And when we came out of that, I realized because I was a new mom, I was having a lot of trouble treating my business as a business and not as a fun hobby that I do with my spare time.
Mm.
I think a lot of moms can fall into that trap because we think like I work from home. I started my own business because I wanted the time freedom to spend time with my family and to be a good mom and to not have to be in the office 8 to 5 every day and be commuting. And eventually I had the click where my brain was like, wait a second, your business isn't growing as fast as you want it to. You have a life coaching business. So for me, what that looks like from a management perspective is that I have my home office, I have my computer. I spend probably about 80% of my time marketing and about 20% of my time coaching clients.
Mm.
And I have full control over how much time I spend on that. So if I want to spend 4 hours a week on that, I can. If I want to spend 80 hours a week on that, I can. But with my kid, I ended up doing it more like 8 to 10 hours a week because life was happening. And eventually one day was like, you know what? What if I had decided to open a coffee shop instead of a life coaching business? And I think a lot of us now in the age of the internet, we have either online offerings or we have a service based business. The hours are really flexible and we love that about it. But if you were going to open a coffee shop and you were only open for 8 hours a week, no one's going to come to your coffee shop, especially if it's not the same 8 hours every week, right? Like you don't want coffee all the time, but you can't just open a coffee shop when someone wants to come in and buy coffee. You have to have the coffee shop open. You have to show up. You have to keep like all the supplies ready and on hand because at any moment when someone comes in and wants that drink, you have to be ready to make them their coffee. And it just was like a light bulb going off in my brain. It's like, oh my gosh, I would have failed at my coffee shop because I'm not showing up consistently. I'm not treating it like it's a job or a business. I'm treating it like I can show up whenever I want and it'll be there for me. I'm taking it for granted, really. And so the biggest mindset shift that challenge that I had to overcome was my own brain telling me, "Oh, like this isn't really a business, right? This is just something you do when you have time for it and it's making you some money, but you're not really like a business owner. You're not really, a CEO because it's hard to shift from being an employee to being a CEO. The mindset stays with you. Once I was able to overcome that and just realize like if I was opening any other small business, if I was opening a clothing boutique or a nail salon, or if I was opening a bookstore, right? You have to show up every day. You have to have your set business hours and you have to show up and do the work every day. You can't just do it when someone calls you and say like, "Hey, I'm ready to come get a coffee now."
True. So what did that look like for you?
For
What did that
me,
look like? You were doing 8 to 10 hours a week, right?
yeah.
So
Well,
then
it
how
was
did you do that?
It was all about the way I scheduled it. So I had been doing it like, well, when do I have a client session? Okay, those are on my calendar. When do I have time to work on my business? Okay, it's when my kid is in daycare, or when he is with his parents. If um if school is closed or if someone's sick, all right, like I'm mom first and I'm business owner second. And yes, that's true. Like obviously for me, my kid comes first in emergency situations. But once again, if I had opened a coffee shop and my kid has to stay home from school, I'm going to have to figure out a way to open the coffee shop anyway, right?
Right.
So For me, it looked like setting my hours at the start of every week and deciding these are the hours I'm going to be working on my business. And I'm going to commit to those. These are the hours we're open. And maybe it's not 5 days a week, like Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, because that's not what I want my job to look like.
Hmm.
But I am going to I'm going to decide how many hours I need to spend on my business, and I'm going to commit to that many hours. And this is really hard. I had to learn to ask for help because on those days when, okay, it's spring holiday now for my kid's daycare, whatever that means, he can't go into daycare this week. Don't know why a 3-year-old needs a spring break for a whole week, but if that's the way they've scheduled it, what am I going to do? Like, am I going to just not work for the week? No, the coffee shop's got to open. So I have to suck it up and I have to call my in laws. I have to ask my husband maybe to take a couple of days vacation leave. I have to figure it out so that I can open my coffee shop. And so for me, it was really setting my schedule at the beginning of the week and then sticking to it and learning to ask for help from the people who wanted to help me anyway.
Hmm.
But gosh, asking them is just so hard.
I know. And the spring break is not for the kids, it's for the teachers. So for the daycare workers, they
Well,
said
they
they
do
need a
deserve a
break.
break.
Right, right. They need a break. So good for you because delegation, I think, is one of the hardest things. And asking for help is the second hardest thing because as a business owner, you're thinking, I got to be in control. I got to have my hands on in every piece of the pie. And if it's not, then it's going to fall apart. But then again, if you don't have a team to help support you, then things could fall apart anyway. And people look at and admire the success of other people, but you also have to draw back and realize they have a team. They don't do everything by themselves. And they wonder, how do they get to do all of this? How do they accomplish? They have a team. And one way to do that is asking for help, asking for support, and even sometimes delegating. So, Megan, what advice would you offer? And you've given us plenty of golden nuggets in this conversation, but what advice would you offer aspiring entrepreneurs who are hesitant to leave their current jobs and pursue their passions?
Yes, I would say, well, quickly, you have a team, right? Don't think that you're on your own starting off all by yourself. Just because you don't have employees doesn't mean you don't have a team. Maybe your team is your partner or your sisters or your best friends, right? Like you have people you can ask for help, and
Mhm.
learning to receive help without shame is the number one thing that's going to help skyrocket you as an entrepreneur in any business you
Mhm.
decide to start. So
Right.
know that your team is already there. You can start asking them right now for help and support,
Mhm.
whether that looks like asking for capital or asking for help making connections or asking for someone to watch your kid for 2 hours while you figure some stuff out. My second piece of advice would be if you're holding yourself back from leaving a full time job and transitioning into entrepreneurship, I want to make sure you're not doing it because you think that having like a W-2 job where you're an employee is a safe bet, because it doesn't matter how cushy the job is or how much money you're making or how stable they want you to think it is. It doesn't matter if they say our job is a family. The reality is that if something happens and they need to lay people off, they're not going to lose sleep over letting you go. I know so many people who are in tech jobs right now who are going through layoffs after layoffs after layoffs because things are changing fast. And if I had stayed in my job at the university, right, through the pandemic, so many people got laid off from universities during the pandemic because people weren't coming to colleges in the same way. We were changing the whole way we do education. There's a strong message coming at entrepreneurs and especially women who have families, that the safe and responsible thing to do is stay an employee because that is safe. but it's
Mhm.
not actually any safer than being an entrepreneur. It's just someone else's success or failures that dictates whether you have a job and a paycheck instead of your own. So if you're keeping yourself small because you think it's the safer option, just zoom out real big and look around and remember that that's a story that we've been telling ourselves that may or may not have been true at some time in the past, but it's not necessarily true right now. So if it's not true, does that change the way you feel about starting your own business now? And if it does, go for that.
Thank you for sharing that because what you just said right there actually feeds into the statistic I mentioned in a previous episode that men are more apt to leave a job where they are uncomfortable, where they are fighting depression, where there's a lot of stress. They will walk away, take a pay cut for happiness. Whereas statistically, as women, we feel I got to hold on to this job because it means security. And as women, I think a lot of us, I know for me, security is a big thing. I want security. And you think that 9 to 5 with the health benefits, and I'm not taking away from that because health insurance is very
It's important.
important. It's important. But we'll hold on and we will suffer. We will allow ourselves to be talked down to, discredited, devalued for that 9 to 5. So you brought up a good point. Don't think that that job is ultimately secure. I've worked in education for over 20 years, and I can tell you there have been times that I've lost my position, even in education. Nothing is secure under the sun, but if you're willing to put in the work to make it happen for yourself, and like Megan mentioned, having a schedule that's going to work for you. Because, hey, if you think about it, yes, if you had a brick and mortar, you had that coffee shop, then it's got to open. You got to be open for business. But guys, you know what? Let's keep this conversation going. I want to hear from you. What has been one of the biggest takeaways from this episode? Send me a DM on Instagram at Work It, Live It, Own It, and let me know what have been some of the biggest takeaways from the conversation I've had with Megan today. Because, Megan, you've unloaded a lot today. And I want to thank you for being brave enough and vulnerable enough to share your journey and your story and your shift. You have encouraged me. You have inspired me just by being here. So thank you. And I hope that this episode reaches someone else, like we talked about before the show, an aspiring entrepreneur, a current budding entrepreneur, even some that have been in business for a while. May they hear this episode and may it touch them and inspire them as well. So before we end this show, I got 2 rapid fire questions for you. Are you ready?
I am.
Okay. What's the most surprising thing you've learned about yourself since becoming an entrepreneur?
Ooh, the most surprising thing I have learned about myself since becoming an entrepreneur is that I am a great employee, but I am a terrible boss to myself sometimes. Right? I'm not a mean boss, but I'm not always the most like assertive. Right? A good boss is going to give you structure and boundaries and direction and clear goals to reach. And sometimes I struggle with doing that. I can show up for other people, above and beyond. But in my own business, it's really hard to do that because my boss is me and she's too lenient. She's too lenient sometimes.
We can be so lenient on ourselves. Absolutely. Absolutely. But when we're given structure and tasks,
Mhm.
some of us do great without it and they can focus and pinpoint. And then some of us, we're just loosey goosey. We just fly by the seat of our pants and we go rogue. So
Yeah,
I
wouldn't it
get
be
it.
great if instead of hiring like a virtual assistant, we could hire like a virtual boss to just like tell us what to do, like
I think we
remind us
can
to
get a
get our stuff in.
right. I think we can get accountability partners that can say, okay, what are your goals for the week? And then check in, or even those groups like you talked about, what are some things that we're going to focus on for this month, and then check in. So, yeah, I get it. We can get accountability partners or someone to check in with us at least once a month minimum to hold us accountable, hold our feet to the fire, as it were. Second question for you: if you could travel anywhere in the world tomorrow, where would you go and why?
My gosh, I would go to Denmark,
Okay.
Copenhagen specifically. It's been on my list for a while. I am obsessed with Denmark. It's ranked like it's either the number one or number two happiest country in the world.
Hmm.
I'm a life coach, right? Like I want to help people find happiness. I feel like this is where I need to go. This is where I need to learn from. Like, why are they so happy? How can we help this? And also, I think it's just beautiful and picturesque. I love the sort of like the Scandinavian countries with all the like water and canals and the fjords and the mountains and uh, weird food. I think that would be my number one place I'd want to go to.
Okay. Great for you. So keep me posted on when you actually go, and let me know how truly a happy place it is when you
I
go.
will.
Okay. All right, guys, this wraps it up for this episode of Work It, Live It, Own It. Again, let's keep this conversation going. If you have any questions for Megan, takeaway points, what did you learn today? What was a big takeaway point for you from this episode? Do not hesitate to send me a direct message on Instagram at Work It, Live It, Own It, and I will be sure to pass it on to Megan. And again, Megan, thank you so much for taking the time to enlighten us today and sharing your story and your journey into entrepreneurship. Take care, everyone, and please don't forget to work it, live it, own it in your everyday lives.